Chapter 21 of Miss Pimm's Camouflage. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Miss Pimm's Camouflage by Lady Dorothy Stanley. Chapter 21. The next day Miss Pimm wandered invisible about Potsdam, but the dull regularity of the buildings soon drove her to the parks. The formal French gardens of Sans Souci appeared to her unattractive. Perhaps the fierce heat and lack of shade made the architectural garden unpleasing to her. The straight lines of clipped hedges, the long tiers of terraces, the multitude of stiff fountains and statues, with here and there a temple or an artificial ruin, fatigued the eye. Miss Pimm sat down by the great fountain, and stared up at the broad flight of 100 steps leading to the palace of Sans Souci, but felt not the smallest desire to mount them. Leaving the formal garden, she went through the park to the Orangery Palace, another immense building in the Italian style, with towers and terraces, and the inevitable statue of a William or a Frederick. Berlin and Potsdam are dotted all over with effigies of these monarchs in stone, bronze, or marble. Miss Pimm also noted the quite extraordinary number of single figures, groups, or equestrian statues, all emblematic of war. At last she came to the new palace, a vast quadrangular building of brick, with long cloistral colonnades. Here she must return at night and interview the Kaiser. It might have been well to reconnoitre then and there, but the long walk and the great heat proved so exhausting. Miss Pimm even wondered how she would get back to Potsdam. But after refreshment at the Stadtkönigsberg Hotel, and a cup of tolerable coffee, for which she paid 4 marks, Miss Pimm became cooler and almost somnolent, and it was quite late in the afternoon when she remembered the Baron's advice, and decided to forage about in Potsdam for less conspicuous clothes. In a very select establishment she discovered mourning attire, of a good cut and fine texture. She was trying on one of the very sombre crepe bonnets with long veils, when an attendant, seeing Miss Pimm's purple hat, snatched it up with an exclamation. Miss Pimm thereupon decided to keep the bonnet she was trying on, and with the black dress and jacket rolled up under her arm, she hurried back to her room at the Palace Hotel. Miss Pimm had been tempted by a rich silk mantle, but remembering that the rustle of silk would always betray her presence, she had selected a long, loose coat of fine black cashmere, edged with crepe, and a skirt to match. Miss Pimm fairly gasped when she saw herself in the long mirror. These trappings of grief somehow did not harmonize with her sensible, cheerful face. But when the immense crepe veil was drawn over the bonnet, and fell almost to her feet, Miss Pimm viewed this monument of woe with awe. Having resumed visibility, she walked slowly down the Wilhelmstrasse, really somewhat oppressed by her clothes. But after a while she forgot herself, and soon the normal Miss Pimm was flinging back her embarrassing veil, and gazing in at the shop windows, or watching the Berlin crowds listlessly wandering about the streets. Excursionists from Berlin, even in wartime, came out to Potsdam, attracted by woods, hills, and lakes. The Uhlan barracks appeared empty, but on the great drill ground of the Hussars barracks, near the Berlin gate, she saw a great number of young Germans being drilled, boys of 16 and 17, and down a side street she saw an old spectacled schoolmaster actually goose-stepping along the sidewalk, followed by his pupils, boys from 6 to 10 or 12 years old. Miss Pimm asked a woman at the door of a house, who was watching the strange procession, why children were made to do drill so very young. "Oh, it is soldiering, morning, noon, and night. These little ones are preparing for the next war. I used to think war was a fine thing, but we are sick of the horror of it. We were promised a short victorious campaign. We were to have Paris, Calais, England, in a few months. But here we are in the 4th year of the war, and every family in Germany is bereaved. Pardon me, gnädige Frau, have you suffered recently?" Miss Pym did not reply, but again looked at the young cadets drilling in the barrack yard. Then turning to the woman, she asked, "When shall we have peace?" The woman in a low voice replied, "It is said, it is whispered, that we shall only get peace when we surrender. There is not a wife nor a mother in Germany who would not gladly surrender this very day rather than continue." As evening approached, Miss Pym decided that she would dine at the staff officers' mess, and from there proceed to the new palace. She left her rucksack at the hotel, taking only her handbag, after emptying the contents into one of the drawers, which she locked. The officers' quarters were in the Stadtschloss, and all the officers were at mess, in a room off the fine hall. Miss Pym entered unseen, feeling too excited, too wound up to eat. At a rather long table 14 men were seated. Dinner was nearly over, and they lolled back in their chairs, sipping sweet champagne and smoking big cigars. Some of them had but recently recovered from wounds, and were on light duty. Others looked very ill and worn. There were few sound men amongst them, though the wines circulated freely, and in the greatest variety. They appeared sober enough. Miss Pym sat down on a velvet couch behind 2 particularly careworn officers, and listened to their conversation. It appeared to be on the shortage of essentials: horses, winter clothing for the men, leather, rubber, etc. The elder man kept rubbing his face wearily, as the younger and more voluble one said repeatedly, "So you see the difficulty. No rubber, you see the trouble. No copper." Suddenly the elder man asked abruptly, "What about the Englishwoman, that spy at Berlin? Has she been caught?" "Oh, yes," replied the other. "You may depend on it. They have got her by now. I heard, only, mark you, I don't in the least vouch for it, that she was present at a private conference, presided over by Michaelis, and that she stole a lot of maps and most valuable papers from right under his nose. There were awful scenes, and there is a huge sum offered for her apprehension." "Wouldn't I like to catch her," said the younger man. "My debts are such a burden, I hardly know what will become of me." "Well, she isn't likely to come here, where there's nothing doing, unless she comes to note our wounded, as they are carried from the train." "What, with all those spies and detectives and agents at the stations? Not likely. We are shooting that other English spy some time tomorrow." "Dear me, another English one?" "Yes, and a woman too. She was English governess to Baron Munchausen's children when war broke out. As the Baron naturally refused to keep her in his house, she was arrested and interned for some months. Then she was allowed to go and live in a pension in Belgium. Later she heard that an officer, an Englishman she was engaged to, was a prisoner at Liège, so she must needs thrust herself there. The man escaped, and she was accused of getting him out, and helping another officer to escape, and for that she is to be shot. The governor, not liking the responsibility, has, I understand, asked the Kaiser whether she shall be shot or imprisoned for life. It's a disagreeable business, but these women spies are more dangerous than the men. They must be got rid of, otherwise we should be overrun by them. Still, getting your lover away isn't quite spying." "No, that is why they are referring it to His Majesty." "Where is he? At Potsdam? I heard he was at Berlin." "One never knows. He goes about very secretly. He isn't popular just now." "Well, Colonel Fistner said something about his being here. He had a fearful row with the Crown Prince, and is now in one of his unapproachable moods. I pity his valet, don't you? The Crown Prince is really behaving disgracefully. You know Anna Bauer of the Valhalla? Would you believe it, he—" Miss Pym moved off to another group, gravely discussing the chances of peace. I still believe we shall pull it off with Russia. Why, we are spending millions there, and we have awfully good agents at Petrograd. I don't believe in using men of our own nationality. Our best helpers are Russians, and in England, Englishmen. Still, we got Trebitsch, the Hungarian so-called Lincoln, into the English Parliament, and he isn't the only one. But we do better by using the native. In England there are plenty of fools playing our game, and of course there are many to whom we are paying out good German gold. In China also we have to pay. Shang Tsung required a very big sum to restore the boy emperor, and did not succeed. Ah, but he very nearly did succeed, whereas that ass Major Poppenheim, who tried to blow up the Siberian Bridge, was skillfully got rid of by the Russians, and lots of our fellows in America have failed just because we tried to pull off the trick ourselves. We should use the material of each country. Har Dial in India is an excellent agent, and we had others in Persia. Those are scattered now, but we shall look them up by and by. In France we have good friends, some most able Frenchmen, though maybe rather under a cloud. You see, our German agents are not sufficiently well acquainted with the characteristics of the different nations. Would any of our men have had the wit to plead with Englishmen, as did an eminent English writer the other day, who begged them to talk over peace conditions with us on the ground that we were penitent? Isn't that exquisite? We Germans penitent? So the English expect to see the German nation performing an act of penitence, beating its breast and sitting down in sackcloth and ashes, and abasing itself by crawling beneath the yoke of contemptible exactions. The English author goes on to say that England should meet us at Stockholm, or anywhere, to talk matters over, believing that if England assures Germany a tolerable national existence, mark the word tolerable, then the grateful German democracy will overthrow the supports of militaristic imperialism within the German Empire. Why do you quote such rubbish to us? Growled a colonel. Why? To show you what goes down with the British. Was there ever such an idiotic people? Still, such talk is really and truly helpful to us, especially if such tosh helps to bring about a conference at which these simpletons would attend. What we want now is a conference, and that is only to be obtained by smooth words, by appearing to be in a chastened mood. We should make use of native talent in every country we are fighting. In Italy we have a good friend. In Russia we had the Empress, and Rasputin, and Sturmer. Today we have any number of supporters there. But why enumerate further? In England there are newspapers, which you might imagine to be subsidized by us. Perhaps they are. I know we tried to buy French newspapers, so it is quite likely we have an interest in some English papers. Shall we drink, then, to our English friends? This was greeted by an Homeric laugh. We'll bring down the Britishers yet, shouted a fair-haired youth with a pasty complexion. And if we don't, our sons will. So let us drink to the next war. When I was in hospital, said a huge fellow, carrying his arm in a sling, I soothed myself when in pain by thinking of what we should do in England when we landed. I let myself imagine we were marching through Kent. I saw— Hold your tongue, Layman. I know what you did in Belgium, so I don't fancy hearing a recital of your daydreams. Oh, we'll kill all right, and destroy when we get there. I don't see Germans then in a penitent or chastened mood. We'll smash the English yet, yes, and enjoy doing it. But wait till we do. Let them but give us a conference. If we can talk and negotiate, we shall win. And now for the dancing girl at Hartsberg's rooms. The officers jumped up, and going to a table in the big hall, where they had deposited their weapons, they commenced buckling on their swords and pistol holders. Miss Pym followed them, and picking up an automatic pistol, which she put into her handbag, passed out into the dark streets. As she entered the park of Sans Souci, the moon appeared in full radiance, a cold glory, lighting every path and alley. Miss Pym never forgot that night, as she walked gravely towards the new palace, now in the inky shadow of trees, now in the colourless moonlight, herself shadowless. The palace gates were shut. The sentries paced the colonnade within the great quadrangle. There were lights in the outer buildings, but the long lines of windows were darkened. Miss Pym made detours, but saw no open gate, no door ajar where she might enter. Returning to the great gates of the main entrance, she saw the push-button of an electric bell shining white in the moonlight. There was nothing for it. She must ring like a visitor. For quite 30 seconds she pressed the bell, and saw two men, accompanied by two soldiers, cross the courtyard and approach the gates. They peered out through the bars, but seemed indisposed to open, seeing no one there. Miss Pym assumed a gruff voice and shouted in German, "Open, scoundrels, and do not keep your betters waiting." At once the porters swung open one side of the great gate, and stepping forward, looked up and down and round about. Miss Pym passed in, as 4 soldiers joined the astonished porters. She left them quarrelling, and passed along the great frontage of windows to the right of the building, on the wild park side. Finding no entrance, she retraced her steps and walked to the left wing. At the farther end, near an open door, servant girls were larking with sentries. One girl was throwing food, bread and sausage, at a soldier, who caught it in his mouth like a clever dog. Miss Pym brushed past them, and ran down a long passage. Kitchens, butteries, pantries opened on to the passage. A leather-padded swing door led into one of the corridors of the palace. Opening a lofty door on her left, Miss Pym found herself in a long hall or gallery, lit up by the moon. The polished floor gleamed like silver, and all along the walls the moon shone on upright glass cases containing shells and minerals, which sparkled and glittered so brilliantly that Miss Pym had the impression of walking at the bottom of the sea. Everywhere she saw shells and corals and rocks, a most unexpected and truly remarkable sight. This gallery reached the whole length of the palace. Opening the door at the end, she found a square hall and staircase leading up to the private imperial apartments. Ascending the fine staircase, she heard voices, and doors opening and closing. The first floor was lighted at intervals by shaded lights. A huge German in a Jaeger uniform walked up and down, turning sharply as though on parade. Miss Pym watched and listened. Voices could be heard in one of the rooms, which was on the soldier's beat. She paused at the door, waiting for the soldier to pass, and as he did so she grasped the door handle, turned it gently, and found herself in the bedchamber of the All-Highest. It required all her self-possession, quickly and gently, to close the door and walk into the room, every detail of which was forever to be photographed on her brain. The room was spacious, but too lofty, thus wanting in perfect proportion. At first she saw only the bed, softly lighted by a silk-shaded electric lamp. The bed was low, immense, and very flat. Far up overhead a golden eagle held a ring in its fierce curved beak, and from the ring descended thick blue silk curtains of woven damask, which parted and drew back like a woman's hair on a white forehead. The light fell on the Kaiser, sitting up very erect, hardly leaning at all on the piled-up pillows. Dressed in white silk pajamas, he sat clasping the hands of a man in faultless evening dress, a burly fellow with a golden beard and brown hair. The Kaiser looked old, but less old than she had expected. The bony frame of his face stood out sharp, leaving shaded hollows which molded the face so that it might have belonged to a bust of anxiety and sorrow. The eyes were fierce and restless, rather bulging, and even scared in expression. The moustache was quite white, and much smaller than in his earlier portraits. Miss Pym thought, here is a man who has a look of the Kaiser, but she would never have picked him out as the All-Highest. Somewhat unshaven, he had a neglected appearance, which was heightened by the disorder of his abundant white hair, which stuck up in a way we call staring when applied to the coat of an animal. His complexion was well tanned by sun and air, leaving a white top to the forehead where the helmet or cap protected it from the light. The man looked curiously insignificant, and yet, thought Miss Pym, how extraordinarily significant, for here was the man who had caused the death of millions, soaked Europe in the red blood of youth, and caused a river of tears to bathe the world. This was his Imperial Majesty, who, wishing above all things to bulk large in history, had throned himself on crime, and crowned himself with infamy. Perdita Pym gazed on that face, partly familiar, partly strange and unknown. Surely this was the evil one, who had to be loosed a little season out of his prison, and who went out to deceive nations which are in the 4 quarters of the earth, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. He was speaking querulously to the stout German. Sit here on the bed, Anton. Talk to me. I am so troubled. You wouldn't believe what I have to put up with from Willi. Am I not Kaiser? Why, I could degrade him to sub-lieutenant tomorrow, if I pleased. He and his Junker friends got Bettmann pushed out. My dear Bettmann, you know, Anton, Bettmann and I, we understood each other. He never irritated me. Now Willi and his detestable set got Michaelis in Bettmann's place. Ach, Michaelis, a nobody at all, just their tool. When I go and speak of what I will do to those verflipped English, Michaelis jumps up and talks of peace negotiations. He's just a weathercock, turns every way, and is no man for me. Anton, it is bad for my health to get so angry. My stomach and brain suffer. Yesterday, but for you, my beloved Anton, I should have killed von Bolsrode. Yes, with these hands, in spite of the gout in this finger. Dear me, gout, your Majesty? I don't believe a young and vigorous man like your Majesty suffers from gout. Besides, you are so abstemious, a pattern for us all. Gout? No, that is impossible. A smile of relief flickered across the Kaiser's face. But see this finger. It is red and swollen, he said plaintively, holding his right hand up for Anton's inspection, who took it with the gentleness of a woman. No, no, it is not gout. See, this heavy gold ring is rather tight. Your finger has swelled, and there is a little eczema caused by moisture. You should slip the ring off at night, and put on a little powder to cool the hand. Perhaps you are right, said the Kaiser, but it is hard to get off. And the All-Highest worked the ring off with an effort. Put it there beside my watch, near the glass of orange flower water. Miss Pym's eyes shone with eager gladness. The key ring, kneeling on a velvet settee at the foot of the bed. She leant her arm on the carved footboard and watched the Kaiser, as though she must read him through and through, and photograph the image of him on her brain. You soothe and quiet me, Anton, he said sentimentally, lying back on the great square pillows. There, it's all right, murmured the big German, in the tones of a monthly nurse. Hindenburg worries me, continued the All-Highest fretfully. He knows I can't stand the sight of blood, yet he always wants to drag me to battlefields, especially in the East. Why, I shiver these hot nights only to think of the cold I endured last winter in Poland. And now he wants me to visit Riga. I dread a cold more than anything, and I had to stand in the snow, talking to the men. No, I will not go again. But, Anton, it is worse in the West, you know. to see dead men and wounded men. They ought to be cleared away when I come. Why don't they clear away those awful bodies? And it hurts me to hear men groaning. You understand, Anton? Yes, your Majesty. I know better than anyone how sensitive you are, how full of deep feeling. You cannot hear the groans of your brave warriors without acute suffering. Yes, it is just that. How you do understand me, Anton. No one realizes how I shudder at the sight of blood. Ah, well, your Majesty must keep away from battlefields for a bit. And yet the Crown Prince harasses me to go to his front to address his men. He says they are discouraged, and that they are beginning to surrender. Ach, he's no good as a soldier. Only think, Anton, of the men he has lost. Why, I lie awake night after night, especially when I am upset, as I have been all this week, first by one, then by another. There was a pause. Anton evidently wished to say something, but the Kaiser's mood was unpropitious. Then William II, who was lying back, opened his eyes and smiled. "My friend, you are getting fat, in spite of the food restrictions. Your dress suit is too tight." And the Kaiser laughed boisterously, seeing Anton's embarrassment. He always enjoyed finding a raw spot. "Yes, you are losing your figure, and with it you will lose your power over women. Your Majesty is pleased to make merry, but I came not for mere jesting. I came really to petition your Majesty." "Surely I have been troubled enough today," said the Kaiser, moving his head restlessly on the pillows. "I should have waited till tomorrow, but by then it will be too late," replied the big German seriously. The Kaiser, still in a cheerful vein, pretended to look shocked. "Oh, Anton, you are a sad dog. Some new love affair? You want me to order the husband to the front?" "No, your Majesty. It is not a petition for myself. But this evening young Dörtzenberg arrived from Berlin. There has been an informal meeting of some of the ministers, and they are very anxious that you should remit the sentence of death passed on that English girl, Miss Lucy Price, at Liège." The Kaiser's face clouded. "This is Michaelis. And since when has he grown tender towards the English?" he growled. "Oh, it is not tenderness, your Majesty. It is only policy. Michaelis says that shooting this young woman will have a very bad effect with neutrals. She is not a spy, and she only helped her fiancé to escape. It is an affair of sentiment. Nevertheless, an Englishman escaped, and she is English. That is enough. The governor of Belgium is only doing his duty. Let her die." "But your Majesty, Michaelis says it will have a deplorable effect in England and in America." The Kaiser sat up with a jerk, his face twisted with rage, his lips drawn back from his teeth. "You quote Michaelis to me? And he thinks my action shall depend on the effect made in England and America? Why, every man, woman, or child of those accursed countries I would gladly see killed. Nay, I would gladly kill with these hands. Pho! They sicken me. Craven dogs! Holland's turn shall come. My brave men will make short work of the Dutch. Sweden and Norway had better look out. Those wooden houses would burn nicely. Neutrals! Has my policy ever been dictated by the opinion of enemies and neutrals? The governor of Belgium is after my own heart. He shall be decorated. Mark that. Decorated. Let Michaelis notify him that for this particular act of justice, the execution of this Englishwoman, he shall receive from me the Order of the Red Eagle." Miss Pym turned her eyes away from the fiendish face of the Kaiser, away from the stout German seated beside him, and she saw an English girl waiting in a prison at Liège for the last dawn, when she was to step out into the prison yard, there to die for saving her beloved. Silence had fallen. Anton rose abruptly, making a military salute. "It must be as the All-Highest wills. I motor back at once to Berlin. Any other orders from your Majesty?" "No," said the Kaiser shortly, closing his eyes. Again bowing, Anton turned and left the room. End of chapter 21.